This is Andy's Philosophy Corner, the show designed to cleanse the palate of our fragmented minds during these troubled times. I will ask our Chief Philosophical Officer Andy Hoke to expound upon some of the deeper questions that float around our subconscious minds. So without further ado, please join me in a deep bow and tip of the hat to Andy for being here, and start with the questioning.
Greetings, philosophy enthusiasts and listeners of the Steel Plaza podcast. Thank you for tuning into Andy's Philosophy Corner, where we ponder and ruminate on current events with the help of well-known philosophers. Here is where we slice, dice, splice, carefully season and spice the zeitgeist. Subject on this week's podcast: philosophy in the information age. Now, that's a very, very broad subject, so we're going to break it up into three main categories: religion, government, and business. In the information age, this new and critical aspect of life has a new facet: the phenomenal exchange of information. It's an entirely new series of exchanges and implications. I, for one, think that the exhaustive and precise record-keeping is a great feature of the information age. The Internet is like our virtual amygdala. Now, we are invoking the branch of philosophy known as epistemology. How do we know what we know? Belief, truth, and fact are three different words that are regularly used interchangeably, but they each have their own unique definition, and use and context varies widely. These are just words, and dictionaries are lists of words listing other words. But philosophy has always been concerned with ethics and standards in a society. Here's a question for you, dear listener. In an age where technology forces us into behaving more accountably, does ethics play a smaller role as we leave our digital paper trails everywhere we go and for everything we do online? Everywhere your phone goes, we have to be good with Walmart cameras making sure we aren't, with biometrics making sure you can't get into your friend's phone because you don't have their face. With every email you've ever sent, you were forced into better behavior, effectively giving you less of a chance to be ethical, less of a choice, because you have to be. Hung up on the stakes and the choices we all make every day, check this out. Quote, "So much to win, so much to lose. No marvel that I fear to choose." This comes to us from Letitia Elizabeth Landon from her work The Golden Violet, originally published in 1827. So when you have less choice to be ethical or not, is that a loss of some kind? So, segment 1, business is more accountable. Many years ago, I read a book called The Naked Corporation. The Naked Corporation was subtitled, How the Age of Transparency Will Revolutionize Business, and further subtitled, If You Have to Be Naked, You'd Better Be Buff. So this book came out in 2003, and I can remember seeing the title, The Naked Corporation, How the Age of Transparency Will Revolutionize Business. And I had to pick the book up. And, okay, in all fairness, I did not read the entire thing. But it triggered so many thoughts in my mind. It's a fantastic analogy and a great premise for this book. We have a new age of accountability for all of our largest institutions, including business. The idea is that large businesses are now accountable to really anyone with internet service. Employees, stockholders, bondholders, consumers, regulators, and in fact the public at large are now providing a powerful new check on every large company's vast power. Now, it's not a perfect or a limitless mechanism, accountability in the information age. The message, I think, of the naked corporation is positive and encouraging. And in many, many ways, this has already been happening for years. With this robust and agile new method of overseeing the ethical conduct of corporations, it's easy to agree that this new accountability factor is having the desired effect. There's a very strong case to be made that our corporations have been forced into being more responsible in all of its affairs. Whether it is out of fear of the stick or love of the carrot, the change in behavior may be impossible to accurately attribute either to love or to fear. I'll bet you didn't know this. The United States government for several years has required that all real estate appraisal report transmissions are recorded with the Fed using the internet to assure accountability. Overnight, this measure essentially ended many types of fraud, and as a result, American real estate has never been more valuable. All right, Section 2 of 3, Governments are now accountable. Many or most of the same points I made about business behaving better are also true about governments acting better. In philosophy class back at Gettysburg College many moons ago, I learned that in the East, an idea called the mandate of heaven regarding rulers existed in the East. Emperors who sustained long, peaceful, and prosperous reigns were able to do so because they had the mandate of heaven, meaning essentially that the gods looked favorably on this ruler, and because he was a good ruler and was good to his subjects. In fact, I believe the Chinese character for king is a long vertical line at the top and at the bottom, symbolizing heaven and earth. One short horizontal line between them, symbolizing the king, and a vertical line through the center of all three horizontal lines. Sketch it out if you've got a pencil and paper. And check this out. We're talking about governments being more accountable. I won't say her name, but I am good friends with someone who took on a dictatorship and won using the internet. She was the main driving force online who got an actual political prisoner actually released. Using Facebook and email and maybe other uses of the internet, my friend legitimately was instrumental in freeing a political prisoner who hadn't done anything wrong. Her love for this country, its people, and this one person actually got this man out of prison. Hers is one of many stories about bad actors facing repercussions for their misdeeds. And isn't this something like Gandhi did about 100 years ago? I admire that man. Without holding an office, religious position, no military command, just the sheer force of Gandhi's will got the British kicked out of India. One of the tools he used was information, bringing the world's attention to the mistreatment of people in Africa and then in India at the hands of the British government. He made them more accountable to a global audience. Sound familiar? His passive resistance strategy was also brilliant, but we'll have to save that for our discussions about metaphysics. Third subject, religion is more accountable. Up until 100 or 200 years ago, religion worked just fine. People occasionally heard about other religions and other places, but very few actually learned more than a little bit about any of these other religions. Some of you have heard of Daniel Dennett. He is a contemporary philosopher, and he tends toward the agnostic, perhaps the atheist, but he is in favor of teaching religion in schools because he's only in favor of teaching all religions in schools. When you study other religions enough, they all end up seeming pretty arbitrary. And we have all learned much more about other religions than the people who lived up until 20 generations ago. And especially in the last generation with the internet, we have much, much more than even one generation ago. This was eye-opening for me when I studied Eastern thought. I found courses on Buddhism, Taoism, Hindu, Shinto, and Confucianism in both the philosophy department and in the religion department at Gettysburg College while completing my undergraduate work. Well, Shinto and Hindu can be called religions. The others, not as much. So as a Westerner, I learned that we in the West currently draw a sharp distinction between religion and philosophy, but this was not always the case. What changed? Information became widely available. It's sort of like when people say, the Bible. The Bible? I think someone's using the wrong adjective. I think you meant to say this Bible or that Bible. You have to be specific, since there are dozens and dozens of different books going by that same title. And that's the point. We know that there is version after version after version of the Bible. Going back to the 1500s, we had Polish astronomer Tycho Brahe, and in the next century Galileo, with irrefutable and increasingly widely known evidence that ours is not a geocentric universe. The Earth is not at the center of the universe. It's a heliocentric solar system in a much, much, much larger universe. So Galileo and Tycho Brahe, they both got in a bunch of trouble for sort of saying that the Vatican was fake news. When it comes to truth and epistemology and how do we know what we know, American Mark Twain once observed, it is far easier to make someone believe a lie than it is to convince them that they have been lied to. Now, I doubt we would have the internet today if not for the Gutenberg press of the 1400s. Many rulers banned the printing press and even people from learning to read back then. The reason they banned books was because it saved them the trouble of finding all the books, putting them in a big pile, and setting them on fire. Much more convenient. Many rulers decided that their subjects should remain uninformed and uneducated. However, in the areas where reading was allowed, in these areas people began to flourish, and the quality of life for people in these areas began to improve dramatically, decade after decade after decade, until Instagram. I like to think that if you're doing something shady, time is not on your side in the information age. Maybe we should also consider Amira's law, which states, quote, "We tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and underestimate its effect in the long run." Sadly, I do have to let a little air out of this balloon, all of the wonderful things that have come from the information age, because This is also, and most unfortunately, the age of disinformation and misinformation on a scale